Hi, this is Stephen Haynes of Haynes Fire and Risk Consulting, presenting Rural Water Supply in the 21st Century, Part 5B. In 5A, we focused on concentrated water tactics for the first engine. In 5B, we're going to concentrate on the second engine and onwards. So upon arrival, the second arriving engine, and we're assuming a rear lot property again, their job is to forward lay a supply line from the street back into the fire ground. Once on the front of the building, their crew is going to go assist the crew for the first engine, and the driver is going to get off his ass. The driver doesn't get to just sit there and think, well, I don't have no responsibility here because my lines aren't in service. He's got a bunch of things to do. As a matter of fact, he's going to be our water supply manager underneath this SOP. He's going to set up a supply line to the first engine. He's going to immediately charge that line to 40 or 60 psi. And the most important part about that is once that line is charged and the other driver opens the intake valve, the fire ground is now on the tank water of that second engine. The first engine, because there's a check valve in his pump to tank line, or I'm sorry, his tank to pump line, the tank water that he's got is being held in reserve, and the fire ground's now on that second engine. The driver for that second engine is also going to take the line that he just laid, and he's going to stretch it up to the other intake of that first engine. Everything is going to focus on keeping water and moving water through that first engine in the concentrated water tactic. So in this slide here, the second engine's arrived. The pump operator has stretched a hose line up to a suction on the first engine. He's giving him his water at 40 to 60 psi. The fire ground's now operating off of his tank, with the tank on the first engine being held in reserve. He's also taken his supply line that he stretched up and he's put it on the second inlet of that other pumper. We don't have anything feeding it yet, but the thing to keep in mind here is now this driveway is pretty much closed, particularly a driveway that's in an S pattern like this. The attack's transitioned to an interior attack. The other thing we want to also mention is that this driver should be cracking his pump to tank valve open and stealing as much water as he can off of this to bring his tank up to full volume. We always want to keep that water moving and hoarding it as close to the fire attack as we can. The other thing we should point out too is that our gallons to driver ratio is still 1,000. We're only getting 1,000 gallons per driver at this point. Before we move off this slide, I just wanted to take a moment to point out that there is a bottleneck in most pumpers. It's not the size of the pump, it's the size of the tank to pump piping. When you buy a pumper from the factory, unless you specify otherwise, it's going to be designed to flow 500 gallon a minute at 80% of the tank level. So if you want to be able to flow 1,000 gallon a minute off your truck, you need to tell them that when you build your truck. In this case here, when he first arrived, this engine, he's probably going to be limited by that tank to pump piping. If it's a small pipe, he's got 500 gallon a minute at the most. The nice thing about this layout is because once this guy takes over and starts feeding him water, he's going to have maybe a similar restriction of 500 gallon a minute, let's say. But if this guy needs to jump it up to 700, 800, 900 gallon a minute momentarily, because his tank to pump is open, it's only being held out by a check valve, he's going to be able to exceed that because now he's pulling through both tank to pump valves. So this is a very efficient way of being able to hit some peak flow rates. As I mentioned earlier, the second driver is going to become our water supply manager in front of the building. So once that first engine receives water from the hose lay, he's going to have to idle down or take his pump out of gear. He's going to open his tank to pump valve and he's going to fill his tank so he's got that water in reserve. Then he's going to work with the first engine's driver to manage the water supply and keep the water supply going. Start his engine up as needed, engage the pump, bring the pressures up if we need more flow, more water. So there's a couple key elements here we want to discuss in front of the building. First, the first engine operator is focused solely on the firefighting lines. The second engine operator is focused on water supply to that engine. Anytime there's excess water or time available on the fire ground in front of the building, these guys have to keep their tanks filled. In the event of a mechanical failure on the first engine, all the second engine needs to do is bring his pump up to pressure. He might have to bring it up to like 200 pounds, 180 pounds, but he can push through that guy's pump even if it's not spinning. And the other thing too is the transfers between the engines, if you follow this SOP, it's all pressure driven and inherent. There's no drama involved. There's really no need for excess radio chatter. I've got a couple slides coming up in the near future here to better show how that all works and how automatic it is and simple. Next couple slides we're going to talk about what the first arriving tanker is expected to do. So when they show up, they're expected to send any excess manpower up to the fire building for firefighting purposes. The driver is going to pull a hose line. He's going to connect to the Siamese or manifold at the second engine left at the base of the driveway. And he's going to charge that line to 100 psi. When he does that, because the excess pressure, he's automatically going to switch the water supply from the second engine arriving to him, because his pressure is going to take that second engine out, and that's when the second engine is going to have to idle down and shut down. I've got a diagram to show that in a little bit. So some of the key elements here is that an LDH or Siamese or manifold capable of receiving at least 2 lines should be on the end of that 4-inch or 5-inch hose, whatever hose you lay up the driveway. The pressures are at 100 psi, even with 5-inch. That's enough to move a 1,000 gallon a minute, 1,600 feet on level ground. So it's plenty of pressure. And the nice thing about it, it's probably below most of the nozzle pressures, or equal to most of the nozzle pressures. So even if that first engine driver has to idle down, he can still manage his hose lines without getting overpressured and having to get a lot of chatter going back and forth between pump operators arguing about pressure. You'll find that that's one of the things I keep mentioning here is I hate radio chatter between drivers arguing over pressure when there's plenty of controls to manage these things. The other thing too is we're keeping as many hands as possible available for the fire ground and not getting them tied up in an extensive water supply operation. So in this slide, the first tanker's arrived. He's connected a line to the Siamese connection and he's charged the line. So now he is feeding the fire ground. The water in the tank of the first engine is being held in reserve. It's ready for instant use via the check valve in the tank to pump line. The driver of the second engine, he has idled or shut down his pump, and he's now filling his tank until it's totally full. And he's going to basically stay in this area. He is responsible for doing all the tasks that are related to water supply. He's connecting hoses, opening valves, he's operating the bleeders, but he's in constant communication with this driver on the first engine. His job is to keep this first engine full of water and keep it able to flow. The driver of the first engine, his sole responsibility is to make sure that he's providing enough water and pressure to the hose lines that are in operation on the fire ground. Notice that our gallons delivered per driver has jumped up to 1,667 gallons a minute, so we've increased that by almost 70% with just one truck arriving on the fire ground. And we've got a relatively small amount of hose or water that's stranded in this line compared to the size of the tank on that vehicle. If this was a 1,000-gallon tank or engine, we could, half the tank volume could be wasted in this hose, where here we're probably somewhere in the 1/5 to 1/3 range in most cases. The other thing to keep in mind too is we still have this issue of tank to pump piping, and that applies to tankers as well. But the nice thing about this scenario is if we had to, we could bring this pump back online and charge it, and this guy could go to 3 times the capacity of the tank to pump valves on all 3 of these trucks. So he can get a lot of water here for short bursts if he needs to, or if command needs him to. Just one of the things we wanted to point out, that with this Siamese at the end of the driveway, if we're using a Siamese or a manifold, any vehicle with a sizable tank can be used. So if the second tanker doesn't get out but another engine gets out, we can take the water off of that engine as well. And we can just keep plugging and playing, plug and play, because we've got 2 hose outlets. When one's almost empty, we bring another one online. So that's a really important feature of going this route with a Siamese connection or a manifold versus just having this tanker feed this line directly. So our SOP for the second arriving tanker is very similar to the first. When he pulls up to the scene, he's going to let his crew go. They're going to head up to the fire building. The driver's going to pull a line, connect to the Siamese fitting, and then what he's going to do is he's going to get that line bled and charged, and he's going to sit there and he's going to wait for the first tanker to tell him that they're almost out of water. When they tell him they're almost out of water, he's going to bring his line up to 100 psi. The other tanker is going to break his line down and go out and go get refilled. Another truck can pull in there and take that other tanker spot. As an alternative, if we're using a clappered Siamese instead of a gated manifold at the end of the driveway, he could initially come up, charge his line to 80 psi. He keeps his tank to pump valve open, so he's recirculating water through his tank so he doesn't overheat his pump. And the nice part about that is when that first tanker physically runs out of water and loses pressure, his line's going to instantly take over via the check valve and the clappered valve. And then all he has to do then is bring the pressure up to 100 psi, and the fire ground's barely seen anything during that switchover. So in this slide, the second tanker's arrived. He's connected to the manifold, but he's not charging it, so we have an X in the line. You'll notice our gallons delivered per driver ratio has jumped up to 2,000 gallons with his arrival. The first tanker is still supplying the fire ground. Once again, everything's really going to be limited by the tank to pump piping if it's not been properly chosen and specified at the time of construction. In this image here, the first tanker began to run low on water, so the second tanker charged the line and took over the water supply. The first tanker's broken away from its line and is going to go refill. This Siamese is an important concept to keep in mind at the end of this line. There's a lot of departments that would have charged that line, connected that line directly to the first arriving tanker, and then everything's going to feed that first arriving tanker. But now you've tied that truck up and you can't go get it refilled. And you're going to cause a space issue up in the possibly along the roadway. By using a Siamese, any truck, whether it's a pumper, a tanker, can come in here, connect a line, pump its tank, switch over to the other truck that's already connected. He starts supplying the fireground. The empty truck rolls out, and another truck can roll in. It's not quite as effective or efficient as a folded tank in the amount of time that the vehicle's sitting on the fireground. But from a manpower standpoint, this is a very efficient way of getting water up to the fireground for the typical structure fire. Just to summarize some of the things we've talked about in Part 5, A and B, it's really important to remain offensive if at all possible. Don't waste time or water by trying to save water. Some of the things here, never risk losing an easy rescue. A visible person's in imminent danger. Make sure you got your priorities straight. We talk a lot about water supply in these presentations, but remember, the rescue is more important. The potential for fire escalation goes up astronomically when a building becomes fully involved. So that's why we really need to try to stay and maintain an aggressive offensive or an aggressive defensive posture as much as possible. We don't want to have a radiant heat and ember issue if we can avoid one. Use water aggressively and effectively. Research, learn, and apply this testing from the UL, the stuff that's written on transitional attack, SLICE, RS, FICE, 3D. It's going to improve the effectiveness of your water applications. It'll make things easier for rescue and open and extend a window of opportunity for you to achieve it. It'll help you improve firefighter safety. It'll help you buy time also when you're waiting for more water to arrive on the fireground. Some of the advanced concepts to take away from Section 5 or Part 5 of our series is you can do a lot with 2 drivers, 2 firefighters, and 2 pumpers. There's a lot of knockdown power there if you plan appropriately so that you can utilize and maximize the effectiveness of those couple personnel. Low firefighter turnout's not ideal. It's hard on everybody, but if your SOPs are based on it, it'll make things easier. The other thing too is drivers who are involved with trucks that aren't necessarily pumping hose lines or operating ladders, they need to get involved. They need to get out of the cab and they need to start helping people. Master streams can be used offensively and aggressively in the rural environment. However, it does require discipline. We need to place and aim them effectively. We need to keep them moving. Darken the fire, shut down, move. Darken the fire, shut down, move. Go interior if it's applicable. So they need to be shut down as soon as possible. I really would encourage you to look at the different monitors out there that have the integrated valve in them and that can be operated with a 2.5-inch hose line. This package here these things typically weigh in the area about 20-24 pounds, and that's very, very mobile, high flow capacity equipment. We've never had this before on the fireground. This is a game changer. I really encourage you to have one of these on every truck. Once again, this is Steve Haynes. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch our presentation. I hope you find it useful. I look forward to hearing your feedback. My contact information is all listed below. Also, I hope you join us in Part 6 of our presentation, where we'll move from working with a specific amount of water, basically tank water. We're going to move over to trying to determine how best to develop continuous water supplies. Okay, take care.